Hi again. Thanks for watching Loma Linda Television. Call the kids because it's kids time. We're going to do some more on astronomy this week. We were showing the kids last week about the beautiful things of the heavens, and as I do this often in children's stories at church, I discover the adults like it too, because you get to see all the beautiful stuff that people don't realize, you know, the beauties out there. And as we showed you last week, actually, a lot of these beautiful pictures, the most beautiful ones probably are actually exploding stars, like these little smoke rings we're shooting out here. And some of these actually shoot out jets, like we showed you again last week. And so you'll see some of the jets shooting out. And so they come out pretty fast. But we see, as we look around our Milky Way galaxy, we see the biggest stars seem to use up their fuel, and we get this nuclear explosion. When they get so big, they can't, like a balloon sort of, they can't support this outer shell. So that kind of helps illustrate some of the stuff we're seeing. We left off last week showing you the butterfly nebula, and what we were doing actually is that when we look in the sky, we look in our Milky Way galaxy, we see these little cloudy areas, mostly hydrogen gas. There's basically 4 different types of nebula. There are nebula that are hot and they glow because they're hot. There's nebula that glow because there's hot stars, bright stars in them. There's nebula that are dark nebula, like we saw the Horsehead Nebula. And then there's these exploding stars, these planetary nebula that are the result of nova or supernova eruptions. And so those are the 4 different types we see. But a lot of times we look at them and go, oh, that looks like a butterfly. Well, we just finished up last week. We'll just back up and show you the butterfly. And here's the butterfly nebula. This picture was not taken from the Hubble Space Telescope. This is from the Subaru telescope in Hawaii. Again, but it's part of our Milky Way galaxy, the butterfly nebula. We think this is actually rotating because if you look, you'll see that in the center stars of that butterfly wing, they're bluish at the top and they're magenta or reddish at the bottom. And because stars that are moving towards us tend to shift towards the blue, and stars moving away from us tend to shift towards the red, they think this actually may be moving, actually rotating. So that is the butterfly nebula. Here we see butterfly wings, and here's the butterfly wing nebula. This, again, probably had a very strong magnetic field in the center that caused those jets to shoot out in opposite directions. Now we see some fingers, but lo and behold, on Mars, we have the fingers on Mars. It looks like some erosion there has caused that to look like fingers. And here we have a helmet, and here is Thor's helmet. Again, this is part of our Milky Way galaxy. Just look at the stars embedded in there. Each one of those stars are separated by average distances they've discovered is 25 trillion miles from star to star. That means if you were going to get in your automobile and you said, I can drive 1,000 miles in one day, to get from one star to the next star at those average distances would take you over 60 million years. Even at the speed of light, at 186,000 miles every second you could travel, if you could travel that fast, it would still take you 4 years to go from one star to the next star at that tremendous speed. So we're looking at something that's really very big, and these stars are really very far apart. So let's just move on. And here we have a sombrero, and here is the Sombrero Galaxy. And this is another universe, 100 billion stars or more. We see it kind of from the edge of the galaxy, and it is just a beautiful sight to see. The next one, we see North America, and in the picture here, we see the North America Nebula. You see Mexico down there at the lower left, and you come up towards that arc in the center, and you can imagine where Texas and Florida and the eastern seaboard is. So there is the North America Nebula. And in the next picture, we see an eagle, and then we're going to look at the Eagle Nebula. Now, at the upper right, you see the head of the eagle. There's a wing to the left and a wing down to the right. And then as we zoom in on the eagle, you see in the center there's some interesting little clouds there. And the next picture will show you the Eagle Nebula. This is the heart of the Eagle Nebula. And if we look at the very top, okay, here's another close-up view of the Eagle Nebula. the heart of the eagle. These are 3 columns of gas. That first column on the left is actually about 6 trillion miles tall. Would take you about a year at the speed of light to travel that distance. And you'll notice there are some what looks like little fingers up there at the top. Those little fingers are like the size of our whole solar system. You could put the sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, all in those little fingers at the upper left. They call that the dragon's head. And so here we see a picture of a dragon. I guess those got reversed there. Just to show you the size of our Earth compared to other planets, Venus and Mars and Mercury, and Pluto, of course, is no longer a planet. They decided it was too small. They decided that its orbit wasn't very close to the other orbits. It's tipped a lot, and it actually comes inside of Neptune for many, many years. It's not the farthest planet, and it's very, very small, so they're saying Pluto is no longer a planet. But here you can see the size of our Earth compared to the Sun. And so it is, you know, very, very, Earth is very, very small. And there was a quotation that I found in Heavenly Places, page 40, and it says, "Behold him who numbers the stars, who created the worlds, among which this earth is but a small speck, and would scarcely be missed from the many worlds, more than a tiny leaf in the forest." Yes, Ellen White wrote that when we did not know how small the earth was. And you can take a look at back up to the previous picture, and you'll see how tiny the earth is. And yet, if you were to get in a boat, a ship, and go to Australia and spend a month out there looking at the sea, in her day, I'm sure it took a month to get to Australia, and for her to come home and say this earth is a small speck was pretty amazing, because we didn't have satellites. We didn't know how small the earth was in those days. So let's move on along with our pictures here. Well, there we go. The sun is not the biggest star out there. Now, on this scale, the sun has disappeared. The sun is so small we can't even see it. And we see big stars, Betelgeuse, Antares, Aldebaran, and Rigel. So there are some stars out there that are huge compared to our sun. Going to the next picture, we see an hourglass. And here is the Hourglass Nebula. There you see the eye in the center that we had looked at earlier. And here is a key. Here is the Keyhole Nebula. That's a little hard to figure out just where that key is in there, but that's what they've named it. And sometimes, you see, looking through a telescope sometimes would be different than what the Hubble sees. So, you know, 50 years ago, somebody looked through a telescope and saw something, saw a cloud, said, that looks like a keyhole nebula. And so a name might have been given to an object like this, and then later the Hubble comes along and takes a picture and sees so much more that it's hard for us sometimes to see exactly what it looked like originally. And this is probably one of those examples. But most of them we can actually see. Here we see some sand dunes. Here's the sand dunes on Mars. And there we see the Dumbbell. Here's the Dumbbell Nebula. Part of our Milky Way galaxy, goes over in the summertime. Sometimes people ask, does everybody see the same stars? Yes, every night everybody sees the same stars, unless you're in the southern part of our Earth. If you're in the southern hemisphere, then you see the same stars that all the people in the southern hemisphere do. If you're in the northern hemisphere, in other words, even though it may be night here and daytime in China, when night gets there, China, they're going to be seeing the same stars we saw, because every night, same stars go over. Of course, we can't see everything in the south. If we were to look towards, we can't see the Southern Cross. The people from the south, southern hemisphere can't see the Big Dipper or many of the constellations that we can see, or the stars that we can see. But we do, everybody does get to see the same stars at their latitude. Okay, let's move along here. Here we see a statement from Nehemiah 9:6. It says, "Thou hast made the heavens, the heaven of heavens, the heaven and heaven of heavens, with all their hosts, and the hosts of heaven worship him." So I think that God has creation out there, like it says in Hebrews 1 verse 3, that he made the universe of worlds. And I think that there are many planets that are inhabited out there in space. And we can look for that day when we get to travel with Christ through space and see the beauties. Isn't that a gorgeous picture? Wouldn't you like to go traveling through space? And if you've just joined us, this is one of our children's story, our children's astronomy for children. And because of all the little creatures that we can associate with the things we see in the sky, and because adults love the pictures too, the pretty pictures, why it's something everybody can enjoy. So we continue to move along here. Here we just see more of the beauty of the galaxy about us. And in Hebrews 11:3 it says, through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God. So there it said worlds plural. He made many worlds apparently. And in Hebrews 1:2, hath in these last days spoken to us by his Son, by whom also he made the worlds, plural again. And here we see in Isaiah 45 that he didn't make the earth in vain. He created the earth to be inhabited. So what about these other planets out there? Did he make those to be inhabited? If he didn't make the earth, he made the earth to be inhabited. He didn't make it in vain. Here we see another galaxy. We're going to get back to our little creatures here pretty quick, but here's a scripture from Matthew 24:31. It says, at the end of the time he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds and from one end of heaven to the other. And in Mark 13, and then he shall see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds. So when Jesus comes in the clouds with power and glory, and then he shall send his angels, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds and from the uttermost part of earth to the uttermost part of heaven. That's in Mark 13. And here's another one in Luke 2. It's a Christmas story. It says, and suddenly there was with the angel a multitude of heavenly hosts. So it's talking about the hosts and about the angels. And we want to understand that this earth is the only place that there's sin in the whole universe. This earth is the only place. In 1 Corinthians 4:9 it says, for we are made a spectacle to the world and to the angels and to men. So here it tells us that we actually, angels can actually watch this earth and that we're a spectacle. Okay, we're going to get back to our little creatures here. You see a cute little dog, and there's another dog, a space dog, and here's the dog star. This is Sirius, a very, very bright, one of the brightest stars in the sky. It is in the constellation of Canis Major, the dog star. And here you see the constellation. If you would look at the stars, you'd see the constellation around the dog. Now we come to the jewel box. This is called, here's the jewel box in the sky. Isn't that beautiful? That looks like a lot of precious jewels, doesn't it, that we see there in this, all those beautiful stars that we see in our Milky Way galaxy. And here we see some little ducks. Well, here is the Wild Duck Nebula. Now, I'm not sure how they got the name for this one, because I don't see where they get the duck, but we put it in because that's what the name is. The hourglass, I think we already saw the hourglass, didn't we? That must have been a duplicate there. Okay, and here's the keyhole. We've seen that. I think somehow these pictures got my computer confused a little bit. But here we see a comet. A comet. Has anybody out there seen a comet, I wonder? That is a beautiful sight. This is not in the galaxy. This is in our solar system. These comets go around our sun, and they are like ice cubes, like dirty snowballs. They're like melting snow and or ice, and they go around the sun, and then they go way, way, way out past Jupiter, sometimes, and Saturn, and sometimes, and Uranus and Neptune, and then they actually stop, and they start falling back towards the sun. So they go really, they go out in space till they slow down, and then they come faster and faster towards the sun, and they whip around the sun fast. They go out in space till they stop and come back. And these comets actually are like ice cubes. They're fairly small, usually just a few miles across, maybe 5 or 10 miles across. And they're hard to see when they get out in the outer part of the solar system. But when they get close to the sun, the heat from the sun and the solar wind causes this ice to melt and vaporize. And then what could be a nucleus at maybe 5 miles across can be like 100,000 miles. It just glows, and it has a tail millions of miles long. So you can always tell where the sun is. The comet goes around the tail. Excuse me, the comet goes around the sun. The tail is always pointing away from the sun. So the comet actually, if this is the tail, the comet actually leaves running into its tail as it goes out in the solar system. So basically it goes around the sun into the outer solar system until it stops, and then it starts falling again back towards the sun. So that is a beautiful sight of a comet. We haven't had any really bright ones for a number of years, but we did a few years ago. Another comet that we had, this is really the last biggest one we've ever seen, and this was Comet Hale-Bopp in our Milky Way galaxy, and just look at all the stars in the background there. Okay, moving back again to Mars, we have the sand dunes on Mars, and here's the dumbbell. So I think some of these, I'm sorry that we got duplicates here. Here is the Dragon's Head in the Eagle Nebula, and as we were moving some of these slides around, something happened, and we have some duplication here, but this is not a duplication. Here we see, again, we're back at the Horsehead Nebula. Look at the beauties around the Horsehead Nebula. Here's the fish's mouth, and here in Orion is the fish's mouth. You see the fish's mouth in the lower part of the picture. Here is the retina. Here's the Retina Nebula. And here is a happy face. That happens to be one of my granddaughters, but here is a face. Here's the face on Mars. Excuse me. That has gotten so much attention. And here's another view of the face on Mars. We see another butterfly. We've had a couple butterflies. Here's another butterfly nebula. Excuse me. This is a Toby Jug, which is from Australia. This is the Toby Jug Nebula. Here is a bubble. Here's a bubble nebula. And there's McDonald's, 99 billion hamburgers. Well, here is the Hamburger Galaxy. Now, this is not a nebula in our galaxy. This is two other galaxies called the Hamburger Nebula, or Hamburger Galaxy. But you don't want to eat too many of those because that's not the best food to eat. If you eat too many of those, you might end up like this. And here we see the Skull Nebula. I mean, this is a skull, but here's the Skull Nebula. Now, if you look carefully, you can see the eyes at the top. So this beautiful place in our Milky Way galaxy is called the Skull Nebula. And here we have what's called the Spirograph Nebula, and that's a beautiful sight to see. And you see again the center star there that this all was caused by. And here we have the Lagoon, and here is the Lagoon Nebula. There's actually quite a couple of nebulas here. Well, we have the Trifid Nebula in the center left there, and the Lagoon above it. And this is all part of our Milky Way galaxy. The southern, if we look towards the south in the summertime, we're looking at, here we see the Vela Nebula, and the Trifid, which is a small one there, and the Lagoon, which is quite a bit bigger. And we see a grasshopper. Here's something that looks like a grasshopper in the Trifid Nebula in our Milky Way galaxy. And here we see the DNA, the double helix. Okay, here is the helix, what's called the Helix Nebula. Now, it doesn't really resemble the helix at all, the DNA, but somehow that name was given to it. This happens to be the closest nebula to our Earth. It takes light about 450 years to get here, to get to us from this nebula, this exploding star, and that is certainly a beautiful sight to see. It actually happens to be very difficult to photograph because it requires long exposures actually to get the beauty that we see there. Here's the California, here's a map of California, and here's the California Nebula. So you see how people have come up with all these little things in the sky that remind them of something on Earth. There you see the Guitar Nebula. And now we see cat's paws. Here is the Cat's Paw Nebula. part again of our Milky Way galaxy. Hydrogen gas clouds glowing. A boomerang. Here is the Boomerang Nebula. Okay, I'm going to skip it. We've got some duplication here somehow. These pictures got duplicated in the computer. And so there we were. Okay, the next one is a whirlpool. And here we have the Whirlpool Galaxy. And so this is not a part of our Milky Way. This is another universe, the Whirlpool Galaxy. And we think this big galaxy has picked up a little hitchhiker galaxy on the right. You see the little one on the right looks like it's been picked up by the gravity of the big one. And because these are spinning, we think that they try to even out the mass. So we have all the stars on one side, and as this rotates, they would want to be balanced like your car wheels. And so if we looked at the arm, you'd see those arms have actually stretched out to the left to try to balance the mass of the stars on the right there that we've been picked up by a little hitchhiker galaxy. Okay, and we've got some mice. Okay, we've got the mice galaxies. Little mice with long tails. These are other galaxies, 100 billion stars in other galaxies. And here we see a bubble. It's out of place. Here's a prawn, and here is the Prawn Nebula. I think maybe you can see that there in the center left. And a tadpole. It's going to become a frog. Here is the tadpole galaxy. So some of these look really a lot like the actual pictures that we expect to see. And here is a hen. This is the Hen Nebula. And here is a pelican. Here is the Pelican Nebula. This is another one I think looked better, more like a pelican in a small telescope than it did in the Hubble Space Telescope. And coming up, we got a monkey's face. And you can look and look and look and try to fix it, see if you can figure out where the monkey is on this one. I think you might be able to see it. If you look carefully, you might be able to see the monkey's face. It might be easier to see this monkey's face than that monkey's face, okay? Okay, and here we have the Elephant Tusk Nebula, and here's an elephant tusk. And we have some beautiful swans. Here is the Swan Nebula. Isn't it cool, all the beautiful, beautiful different things we see out there in the sky? Here's the Broken Egg Nebula, and here are the Eggshell Nebula. Here's the Eggshell Nebula. And here we see Christ on the cross. In the southern part of our sky, we see the Southern Cross. I just don't know if you can see the Southern Cross there, but there's a group of stars that are diagonal across the screen to the left, and you see the cross going from top down to the right. So that is the Southern Cross, only visible from the southern hemisphere. And here we see a cross that's easy to see. But here it is, spelled out. You can see the lines have been drawn so that you can actually see the cross, the Southern Cross. And that is the end of our programs. We had a total of 200 pictures that we showed you there, I see. And so it was fun doing something for the children. But maybe you could become interested in astronomy if you realize how beautiful it is out there. Maybe your parents could get you a telescope and you start looking. You can go out and see the moon, you know, almost every night. The moon through a good telescope would be unbelievable. The things you'd see of the moon, the views you have. You don't want to look on the full moon because when the moon is full, the sun is shining right into all the craters, and it's really hard to appreciate the beauty of the moon. But when the moon's like a quarter, you know, first quarter, last quarter, any other time, but when it's full, then you get long shadows because the sun is over here and the moon is here, and you get shadows in these deep craters. And then You know, you can go out and see Saturn in the sky, 6 months of the sky, and Jupiter's in the other side about 6 months now for the next few years. You'll be able to see either one, Jupiter or Saturn. You'll be able to see the moons around Saturn, the rings of Saturn. You'll see the moons around Jupiter, and the moons are going to change around Jupiter every night. You'll find, you look at Jupiter, and you might have 2 moons on each side. You might have 4 moons on one side. You might have one in front, one behind. And you come back and look a few hours later, and all of a sudden you see the moons have changed. You might even see an eclipse on Jupiter, because sometimes when the moon goes in front of the sun, you see one of the moons around Jupiter, then you'll see a dark spot move across Jupiter. In the good skies with a decent telescope, you'll be able to see the storm on the red spot on Jupiter. The red spot is 3 times bigger than our Earth, and it moves across the planet, and every 10 hours it goes around. And so there's many beautiful things, star clusters. We have globular clusters out there with 1 million stars. These are not other galaxies, but these are clusters of stars inside of our Milky Way galaxy. We have open clusters like the Pleiades. The Pleiades are the 7 sisters cluster of stars. So those are open stars where you can, with the naked eye, see 7 stars, but there's actually about 500 there. And globular clusters where you see millions of stars. So maybe some young people would get interested in astronomy from seeing the beautiful pictures. And kids come back, even though it isn't the week that we're doing the children's story, because you're going to see a lot of other beautiful pictures in the heavens in this whole series we're doing on the Hubble, the Bible, the Big Bang. Well, once again, our program is about to wind down. These half hours go by so fast, I can hardly believe it. But I want to thank you for watching Loma Linda. We pray that this can be a blessing to you, that can help you to realize that God is real and heaven is real, and that He's coming soon, because we see the disasters around our earth telling us He's coming as soon. So it's my prayer that each one of you will make that point to get to know Him, get acquainted with Him, so that you can be ready to go home with Jesus when He comes. And He's coming soon, I think. Thanks again for watching.